It started with the sound of her heels echoing against the marble. Sharp, precise. Emily always knew how to make an entrance. She swept into the house like she owned it, her red dress clinging to her body, her perfume hanging heavy in the air. That's how she came home Saturday night, hours late, while I sat in the dark with a whiskey glass dangling between my fingers. I didn't say a word at first. I just watched her. She stopped mid-step when she noticed me, a flicker of something I couldn't quite name darting across her face. Guilt? No. Emily was too composed for guilt. Jake. Her voice was smooth, careful. Why are you sitting here like a psycho? You scared me. I scare you. I laughed under my breath, shaking my head as I swirled the amber liquid in my glass. You're late. She glanced at the clock on the wall. It's not that late. I told you I was out with Sarah. You always act like I'm breaking curfew. There it was. That tone. Like I was the crazy one. Like I was suffocating her with my questions. She brushed past me, kicking off her shoes, and I couldn't help but notice a slight smear of lipstick on her jawline. I didn't remember her putting on that shade before she left. Where were you, really? My voice came out calm, almost too calm. She paused. I saw her fingers twitch slightly as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I just told you. I didn't move. Then why'd Sarah call me looking for you an hour ago? Silence. That was the first crack. I hadn't spoken to Sarah. I didn't need to. I threw the line out there to see if she'd take the bait, and she did. Emily turned to me, her brow furrowing just enough to betray her. What are you talking about? I mean, I said, standing up slowly, my voice low measured. If you were with Sarah all night, why is she texting me at midnight wondering where the hell you are? Emily froze. I watched her throat bob as she swallowed hard. She was quick, though. Too quick. You're unbelievable, Jake. Her voice dripped with irritation, like I was the one who'd been caught lying. I was at the bar next door for 20 minutes. She must have left early and panicked because I wasn't there. What is your deal? Liar. It rolled off her tongue like second nature. And for a second, I almost let it go. I almost let myself believe her because it was easier than what I was starting to suspect. But then I noticed it, the faintest stain of cologne on her dress. Something expensive. Something that wasn't mine. I didn't push it right then. No, I let her think she won. I let her stomp upstairs, muttering under her breath about how insane I was being. But that moment, the lie, the cracks, I felt something shift. I felt myself cross a line I couldn't uncross. Sunday afternoon, I got the invitation to the party. Sarah again. It was one of those big, loud events Emily loved. Too many people, too much booze, and a general sense of chaos. Emily begged me to come. It'll be fun, Jake. We need this. I stared at her as she said it. Her smile was bright, genuine, like she hadn't lied to my face the night before. I couldn't help but wonder if she thought I was stupid, or if she just stopped caring whether I noticed. So I agreed. But I wasn't going for fun. I went to watch. We walked into Sarah's house together around 8. And it didn't take long for Emily to vanish. She always did at these things. But this time, I didn't try to follow her. I stayed by the kitchen, nursing a beer while my eyes tracked every movement in the room. I watched couples laugh, strangers flirt, friends stumble into conversations they'd forget the next day. Emily didn't know I was watching. An hour in, I caught her reflection in a window. She was across the living room, her phone clutched in her hand as she typed furiously. Every so often, she'd glance up toward the hallway, toward the back door, like she was waiting for something or someone. I stayed where I was, calm, unmoving, waiting, and then she slipped outside. I waited a full 5 minutes before following her, long enough that she wouldn't sense me. When I finally stepped through the back door, I didn't see her at first. The air was cold, the yard dimly lit by strings of fairy lights, and then I heard it, her laugh. Low, flirtatious, intimate. I followed the sound to the far side of the yard, near the tall bushes that blocked the view from the house. That's when I saw them. Emily, my wife, standing way too close to a man I didn't recognize. Her hand was on his chest, her body leaning into his, her face tilted up as she smiled like she used to smile at me. I couldn't hear what he said, but it didn't matter. His lips brushed her cheek as he whispered something in her ear, and she turned to face him. Then they kissed. I couldn't move. My heart pounded so loud I was sure they'd hear it. But they didn't. They didn't even know I was there. The glass of beer in my hand slipped from my fingers and hit the ground with a muted thud. Emily jerked away, her eyes darting around, wild and startled. The man glanced up, confused, but I didn't stay to give them answers. I turned around, walked back through the house, and left without a word. Emily didn't come home that night. At 9 the next morning, there was a knock at the door. I opened it, and there she was, Emily. Her makeup smeared, her eyes red and puffy. She was crying like her life depended on it. "Jake, please," she choked, her voice breaking. "Just let me explain." Emily stood there on the porch, shivering. Her tears streamed down her face, dripping off her chin like they might wash away whatever she'd done. She clutched her phone in one hand, knuckles white, as if holding onto it might somehow anchor her. I said nothing. I just stared at her, blocking the doorway like some immovable gatekeeper. "Jake," she whispered, voice trembling. "Please let me explain." Her sobs were soft at first, delicate, practiced. I'd seen her cry before, over rough days at the hospital, or when she thought her life wasn't where she wanted it to be. But this wasn't the same. This was desperation. But was it desperation for me or for herself? I let her stand there in the cold for a solid minute before stepping aside. I didn't let her touch me as she walked in, though I could feel her gaze trying to latch onto mine. The living room was exactly how I left it. Bottle of whiskey half empty on the table, a glass still sitting where it had been the night before. Emily noticed. Her lip quivered like she'd uncovered the scene of some tragedy. "You didn't sleep," she said softly, as if she had the right to be concerned about me. "Sit down." My voice came out hoarse, sharper than I intended. I wasn't proud of the way it shook, but I didn't care anymore. Emily obeyed. She perched on the edge of the couch like she was waiting for a verdict in a courtroom. She wiped her face with trembling hands, but the streaks of mascara remained like evidence. Clear, undeniable. I stayed standing. "Who was he?" I asked finally, cutting through her silence. Emily blinked up at me. Her lips parted, but no words came. Caught. Her mind scrambled for the right answer. Something that might make me back off, something that might put her back in control. "Jake, it's not what you think." "What do I think?" I snapped, my voice suddenly sharp enough to make her flinch. "Do you think I'm stupid, Emily? Do you think I didn't see you? I was there. I watched you kiss him." Her face drained of color. She opened her mouth, but no excuse came. "No lie. You're going to tell me everything?" I continued, my voice low but vibrating with something I couldn't contain anymore. "Everything. Who he is. How long this has been going on. Why you thought you could do this to me and come home crying like you're the victim." Her tears started up again. This time they weren't soft. They were ragged, messy. "Jake," she croaked, her voice raw. "Please. I made a mistake." "A mistake?" I barked out a laugh bitter and sharp. "A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk at the store. A mistake isn't kissing some guy in a backyard and then staying out all night." She broke under that. Her hands flew up to cover her face, her sobs louder now. I watched her shoulders shake, her frame small and pathetic in the middle of that room. It's a strange thing seeing someone you loved, trusted, reduced to this. But I didn't feel pity. I wanted answers. "You're going to start talking," I said quietly, "or I'm going to start packing your things." Emily's hands dropped, and for the first time that morning, something shifted in her expression. There, in the middle of her tear-streaked face, was a flash of something I'd seen before. Not guilt, not sorrow, anger. "You want answers?" She spat suddenly, her voice breaking through the sobs. "Fine. You want to know what's going on, Jake? You're going on." The accusation hung in the air like a slap. I blinked at her, stunned into silence. "You sit there every night with your laptop glued to your hands, working until 2 in the morning. You're never here, Jake. You don't see me. You don't care about what I need or what I'm feeling. You've turned into a ghost and I'm supposed to what? Just accept that." The room felt like it was spinning. "So this is my fault now?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. "I don't know," she shouted, her tears mixing with her rage. "Maybe it's both of us. Maybe we both gave up on each other, and you just didn't notice." You think this happened overnight? You think I wanted this? She was unraveling. I'd seen Emily lose her temper before, but this was different. It was like watching a storm smash through a glass house. Jagged and destructive, shards flying everywhere. You chose this. I shot back, pointing at her. You, not me. I didn't kiss someone else. I didn't sneak around. Don't you dare try to twist this into something it's not. I didn't sleep with him, she screamed suddenly, cutting through the tension like a knife. Her words hung in the air, vibrating between us. I stared at her, my chest heaving as I tried to process it. And I'm supposed to believe that? I said finally, my voice shaking. She slumped back against the couch, like the fight had been drained out of her. You can believe whatever you want, Jake, she whispered. But I didn't. I swear to you. I didn't know if she was lying. At that point, I didn't know if I even cared. Who is he? I asked again, my voice low, almost defeated. Emily hesitated, staring down at her hands like the answer might be written there. His name is Nate, she finally admitted. Nate. I repeated it slowly, like tasting something bitter. And how long has this been going on? She didn't answer right away. 3 months, she whispered. That was it. My knees felt weak, so I sank onto the armchair across from her, as far from her as I could get. I let the weight of those words settle over me, punching me in the gut, over and over again. 3 months. 90 days of my life, of our life, had been a lie. Emily's sobs softened again, quieter now. She was waiting for me to say something, but I didn't know what to say. My mind was a blank space, too full to process any of it. Finally, I looked up at her. You need to leave. Emily's head snapped up. What? You heard me. My voice was flat. You're going to pack a bag and leave. Go stay with Sarah. Or Nate. I don't care. Jake, please. I stood up, cutting her off. I need you out of this house. I need time to think. And right now, I can't look at you. Her face crumbled, but I didn't let it sway me. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her there with the wreckage she'd created. The only thing I could think as I shut the bedroom door behind me was how a single night, one moment, could unravel an entire life. The door clicked shut behind me, but the sound didn't feel final. Emily's voice was still muffled through the walls as she tried to plead, tried to reason with me like words could rewind the clock. I stood there in the bedroom, staring at the unmade bed where we used to sleep together. Now the sheets looked foreign, like they belonged to strangers. I should have felt something, anger, heartbreak, maybe even disgust, but instead, there was nothing, just this heavy, sinking void sitting in my chest. And then I heard it, a dull thud against the wall. I turned and listened. Another thud, followed by Emily's frustrated sob. I knew what she was doing, pacing, probably throwing her bag together in a hurry. But I didn't go out there. I stayed planted in the middle of our bedroom, staring at the framed wedding photo sitting on the dresser. It was taken 6 years ago, the sun setting behind us as Emily leaned her head on my shoulder, beaming at the camera. I looked so sure in that picture, so certain about her, about everything. I felt sick. I grabbed the frame and turned it face down on the dresser before the image burned itself deeper into my mind. After what felt like hours, I heard the front door creak open. Jake! Her voice trembled, distant now, floating in from the hallway. I'm going. I'll stay with Sarah. The silence stretched. She was waiting for me to respond. Maybe she thought I'd call her back, tell her we could fix this. But I didn't. I heard her sigh, a shaky, defeated sound before the door clicked shut. The house swallowed the noise like it had been starving for peace. The next 24 hours were a blur. I didn't eat. I didn't shower. I sat on the couch and let the TV drone on in the background while my mind looped back to that moment in the yard. Emily's hand on his chest. Nate. I didn't know anything about him. Just a name and the way Emily had said it like a confession. At some point, I started digging. Her phone was gone, but our shared laptop was still here. I wasn't proud of what I did, but pride wasn't in the cards anymore. I opened her email, her messages, anything I could find. And there it was. Can't wait to see you tonight. I'll find a way to slip out early. Nate. The message was 3 weeks old, buried under layers of harmless threads. Shopping receipts, Work schedules, emails from her sister. Like a rat hiding in a basement. I scrolled further, my stomach twisting tighter with every click. They'd been meeting at hotels, bars. Emily had even told me she was picking up extra shifts on nights she was probably tangled up with him. I slammed the laptop shut so hard I thought I might break it. My hands shook as I sat back, the walls of the living room closing in on me. I wanted to scream, to smash something, but all I did was sit there, teeth clenched so hard my jaw ached. 3 months. 3 months of my life stolen by a stranger. I couldn't even put a face to the name, and somehow that made it worse. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. I glanced down at the screen. Emily. I didn't answer. It buzzed again. And again. Then a text. Jake, please. I need to talk to you. I can explain everything. She'd already tried to explain, and all I'd heard were excuses. I shut the phone off, tossed it across the couch, and stared blankly at the ceiling. But it didn't stop there. An hour later, someone knocked at the door. 3 sharp, insistent raps. My pulse spiked, my brain immediately screaming her. I swung the door open, ready to tell Emily to go to hell. But it wasn't her. It was Sarah. Jake, she said, her tone firm and unfriendly, like she'd already chosen a side. Her dark hair was pulled back into a ponytail, and she stood there with her arms crossed like she was about to lecture me. We need to talk. I stared at her, stumped. Why are you here? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked past me, like she was checking to make sure Emily wasn't inside. Then she sighed, shoulders slumping slightly. Emily's at my place. She's a mess, Jake. She won't stop crying. She didn't want me to come here, but I figured someone had to. I barked out a bitter laugh. You had to? What exactly do you think you're here to do? Sarah didn't flinch. She stepped closer, her voice dropping. Look, I know you're angry. Angry? I cut her off, my voice rising. Sarah, I caught my wife cheating on me. Angry doesn't even cover it. She shook her head. You don't know the whole story. That's what she keeps saying, and you know what? I don't care anymore. Jake, listen to me. Sarah pushed. It's not what you think. I know about Nate. The way she said his name made my stomach turn again. Then why don't you tell me, Sarah? What is it I don't know? She hesitated, just for a second. Then she dropped her arms and looked me dead in the eye. Nate's not some random guy. He's someone Emily knew before you two got married. The words knocked the air out of me like a gut punch. My heart thundered in my ears. What? I don't know everything, Sarah admitted. But he's from her past. I didn't even know they were talking again until recently. She swore to me nothing serious happened. She said it was just stupid mistakes. But Jake, she trailed off, her face softening. She's not okay, and neither are you. You both need to figure this out. I couldn't even process what she was saying. I stared at Sarah, my fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. Emily's past. Nate. Some piece of her life she'd kept buried, like a landmine waiting for me to step on. Sarah was still talking, but I couldn't hear her anymore. The only thought pounding through my head was, what else don't I know? And for the first time, I realized the worst part wasn't the kiss. It wasn't even the lies. It was that I'd married a woman I didn't really know at all. Sarah left not long after dropping that bombshell, leaving me alone with the silence of the house and the noise in my head. Nate isn't some random guy. He's someone Emily knew before you two got married. The words circled me like vultures. The past. I'd always thought Emily's past was exactly that, past. She wasn't exactly a closed book, but there were pages she didn't let me read, and I hadn't pressed. I never saw the need. Maybe that was my mistake. I sat on the edge of the couch, phone in hand, staring at Emily's name in my messages. I had a million questions, and I hated that the only person who could answer them was the same person who'd shattered my trust. Tell me about Nate. Don't lie. I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. A minute passed, then another. My phone vibrated. Emily. Jake. Please let me call you. Me. Answer the question. Silence. Then, Emily. We dated. Before you and me. It was a long time ago. I felt the blood drain from my face as I read those words. Define dated. It took longer for her to reply this time, and when she did, the words sliced through me like glass. Emily, We were serious for a while, but he cheated on me. It ended badly, and I haven't seen him since. Until a few months ago. Cheated on her. My grip on the phone tightened. The irony almost made me laugh. So this was Nate, the guy who'd once broken her. And now, years later, she'd brought him back into our lives like a poisonous ghost. I slammed the phone onto the coffee table, the screen lighting up one more time with another message. Emily, I didn't mean for this to happen. I swear to you, Jake. Didn't mean for it to happen. That was supposed to make it better? Like her stumbling back into his arms was some accident. Some force of nature she couldn't control? I stood up abruptly, pacing the living room like I was trapped in a cage. My mind spiraled into memories I didn't want. The first time Emily told me she loved me, the night I proposed, the morning we signed the papers for this house. All those moments felt so solid back then. But now they felt hollow like cheap props on a stage. What other pieces of her life had she hidden? How much of our foundation was built on cracks? I didn't sleep that night. At some point, I found myself in the kitchen, nursing my fourth glass of water. The air felt still, too still, like the house itself was holding its breath. Then my phone buzzed again. A call. Emily. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th, I picked up. What? My voice was cold, barely a word. For a second, there was silence. I could hear her breathing on the other end, shaky and uneven. Jake! Her voice broke. I know you hate me right now, but you have to understand, I didn't go looking for him. He showed up. I didn't say anything, so she kept going, like she had to fill the silence. I ran into him at that coffee shop near the hospital. I hadn't seen him in years, and I didn't even recognize him at first. But he recognized me. I swallowed, my throat dry. And what? You just picked up where you left off? You let the guy who cheated on you walk right back into your life. Emily's breath hitched. No. It wasn't like that. I didn't plan for this, Jake. There it is again, I muttered, cutting her off. I didn't plan for this. Like your lips just accidentally fell onto his at that party. I messed up, she choked. I know I did, but it's not as simple as you think. Seeing him, being around him, it made me question everything. I don't know what's wrong with me. I stared at the dark kitchen cabinets, my hand clenching the phone so tightly I thought I might break it. What do you mean? Everything? Us? Emily didn't answer right away, and the silence hit harder than any word could. I don't know, she whispered finally, so soft I almost missed it. I felt something shatter inside me, like a pane of glass collapsing under its own weight. You don't know? I repeated, my voice quiet but razor-sharp. You don't know if you love me anymore? After 7 years, Emily? Jake, I hung up. The next morning, I woke up on the couch with a stiff neck and the same hollow ache in my chest. My phone buzzed constantly. Missed calls, texts, all Emily. I ignored them. By noon, I was at my brother's place. Ryan lived a few miles out of town, in a little rental that looked like it was held together by duct tape and hope. But it was his, and it was quiet. Exactly what I needed. Ryan opened the door and took one look at me before shaking his head. Dumb, man. You look like hell. Feel worse? I muttered, stepping inside. He led me to the kitchen and handed me a beer. No questions asked. That's why I was here. Ryan didn't push. He let me talk when I was ready. And after about 20 minutes of silence, I finally was. She cheated on me? I said flatly, staring at the label on my beer bottle. 3 months. With some guy from her past. Ryan whistled low under his breath. Jesus. She said she didn't sleep with him, but I don't know if I believe her. I caught them at a party. Ryan leaned back in his chair, frowning. You think she's lying about it? I shook my head. I don't know. I don't even know if it matters anymore. Ryan was quiet for a moment before speaking again, his tone careful. So what now? I exhaled slowly, the question heavy. I don't know. I told her to leave. She's at Sarah's. But she keeps calling, saying she wants to fix things. And do you want to? I looked up at him. How do you fix something like this? Ryan didn't have an answer. Neither did I. What I did know, though, was that whatever Emily and I used to have, the trust, the love, the certainty, was gone. And even if we tried to glue the pieces back together, the cracks would always be there. The worst part? I didn't know if I was more angry at her for breaking us or at myself for still caring. The thing no one tells you about betrayal is how it takes over your mind like a virus. It's relentless. You can't sleep because every time you close your eyes, you see her, with someone else. You can't eat because your stomach knots up with the realization that the life you thought you were living wasn't real. And worst of all, you can't escape the questions. The what-ifs. The whys. I spent the next few days at Ryan's, crashing on his busted old couch. He didn't pry, but I could feel him watching me out of the corner of his eye, probably wondering how much longer I'd sit there staring into space. I wanted to get up, to fix myself, but it was like being buried under cement. On the third day, Emily called again. I don't know why I picked up. Maybe I was looking for answers. Maybe I wanted to hear her crack, to admit everything so I could finally decide what the hell to do next. Jake! Her voice was soft, hesitant, like she didn't know which version of me she'd get on the other end. I didn't say anything. She took that as a sign to keep going. I know you don't want to hear this right now, but I can't just sit here and not try. I can't let us end like this. And the word stung more than I wanted it to. Us, I said, my voice low. There hasn't been an us for months, Emily. You killed that the minute you let him back into your life. She choked on a breath. I made a mistake, Jake. One mistake. Stop calling it that. I snapped, my grip on the phone tightening. Stop acting like you tripped and fell into his arms. You chose him, Emily. You chose to see him, to talk to him, to... I couldn't even finish the sentence. And now you want to act like this is something we can patch up with a conversation? Her silence cut through me. I could hear her breathing on the other end, shaky and uneven, like she was teetering on the edge. I'm sorry, she whispered. I don't know what else to say. I was confused. I was confused. I barked out a bitter laugh. Confused about what, Emily? About whether or not you wanted to blow up our marriage. Did you wake up one day and forget that you're married to me? Or did you just not care? The line went quiet. For a second, I thought she might have hung up. But then she spoke, her voice brittle and low. I didn't go looking for him, Jake, she said. But when I saw him again, it brought everything back. The way I felt before he hurt me. Before everything fell apart. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to prove something to myself, that I could. She trailed off. That you could what? I demanded, every word cutting like a knife. Prove that you still had his attention? That he still wanted you? Is that what this was? No, she shouted suddenly, the crack in her voice so sharp it startled me. It wasn't about him. It was about me, Jake. It was about everything I feel like I've lost. I love you, but I've been drowning. I don't know how to explain it. Her words hit me like a gut punch, knocking the wind out of me. So your solution was to cheat on me? I didn't plan for this, she said again, quieter this time, like she hated the words even as they left her lips. You keep saying that, I whispered, almost to myself. We both went quiet then, the air between us thick with everything unsaid. I could hear her crying, soft and broken, but I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. You don't get to cry, Emily, I said finally, my voice cold. You don't get to sit there and play the victim when you're the one who did this. I know, she said softly. I need you to know that it wasn't about you. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I don't know how I let it get this far. I ran a hand down my face, the exhaustion finally catching up with me. It is about me. You don't get to decide that it's not. You took something from me that I can't get back. And I don't think you even understand what that means. I do understand, she whispered, her voice cracking. And I hate myself for it. Good, I said bluntly. The line went quiet again, her silence heavy and final. After a long pause, she whispered, What happens now, Jake? I didn't answer right away. I didn't know. Everything felt like ash, burned beyond recognition. I need time, I said finally. And I need you to leave me alone. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. I heard her exhale shakily before saying, Okay. I hung up without another word. That night, Ryan found me outside on his porch, staring into the dark. It was late, and the air was cold, but I didn't care. I didn't feel anything anymore. Not the chill, not the ache in my chest. Nothing. Ryan sat down next to me, handing me a beer without saying anything. We sat in silence for a while before he finally spoke. "You don't have to decide everything right now, he said. "But whatever you do, you have to do it for you. Not her. Not anyone else." I nodded slowly, my eyes fixed on the empty street ahead. "I keep asking myself what I did wrong," I admitted, my voice barely audible. "What I missed. Why I wasn't enough." Ryan turned to look at me, frowning. "Don't do that, man. Don't put this on yourself. She made her choices and they're on her. Not you." "I know," I said, though the words felt hollow. We sat there for a while longer, the night wrapping around us like a heavy blanket. I thought about Emily, her tears, her excuses, the years we'd spent together that now felt tainted. I didn't know what the future looked like. I didn't know if I could forgive her, or if I even wanted to. But one thing was clear. Whatever us was, it was gone. All that remained now were ashes and echoes of what used to be. The morning after Emily's call, I woke up on Ryan's couch again, my neck twisted at a bad angle, the blanket half on the floor. I stared at the ceiling for a while, trying to piece myself together, but my mind wouldn't let me rest. It felt like she was still there, Emily, haunting the room like some unseen ghost. Her voice, her face, the way she looked at me the last time I saw her. By noon, I knew I couldn't sit here anymore. The walls of Ryan's place, as quiet as they were, felt too close, too claustrophobic. I needed to do something, anything, to pull myself out of the spiral. I decided to go back to the house. I hadn't been there since I told Emily to leave, and though I dreaded seeing the place where everything fell apart, I couldn't avoid it forever. The drive felt longer than it should have. The closer I got to the house, the heavier my chest felt, like something was pressing down on me. When I finally pulled into the driveway, I sat in the car for a minute, gripping the steering wheel and staring at the front door. Everything looked exactly the same, but it didn't feel the same. The air inside the house was stale, empty. I walked through the living room slowly, my shoes echoing on the hardwood floor. The place was frozen in time. Emily's shoes were still kicked off near the door where she'd left them last, and a mug sat on the kitchen counter like she might come back and pick it up at any second. But she wouldn't. Not yet. I moved through the house in a daze, feeling like a stranger in my own life. I ended up in the bedroom, my hand hesitating on the doorknob before pushing it open. The bed was made now. I don't know why I noticed that first, but I did. Before she left, Emily must have taken the time to fix it. Like that somehow erased what had happened. I sank onto the edge of the mattress, burying my face in my hands. The silence was so thick it was deafening. I don't know how long I sat there before my eyes drifted to the nightstand. Emily's nightstand. There, half hidden behind a stack of books, was a small, red notebook. I stared at it. My chest tightened. I'd seen that notebook before. Emily always said it was where she scribbled work notes, little reminders, grocery lists. Nothing important, she used to say. But now I wasn't sure I believed anything she told me anymore. Against my better judgment, I reached for it. The pages were soft, worn at the edges, like she'd flipped through them 100 times. My hands trembled as I opened it, half hoping I'd find something innocent, something that proved my instincts wrong. But I didn't. On the third page I saw it. His name, Nate. The entry wasn't long, but it was enough to make my blood turn ice cold. I saw him again today, Nate. I thought I'd forgotten what he looked like, but the second I saw him, it all came back. He smiled at me like no time had passed, and I felt, I don't know, alive? That's not fair to Jake. I know it's not, but I don't know how to stop feeling this way. I shut the notebook so fast it felt like it might snap in two. My pulse hammered in my ears as I stared at the cover, my hands gripping it so tightly my knuckles turned white. Alive. That word echoed in my mind, louder and louder until I thought I'd scream. She felt alive with him? What did that make me? What did that make us? A slow death? A cage she wanted to escape? I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor as I shoved the notebook back into the nightstand. My breaths came fast, uneven, as I stumbled back into the living room and dropped onto the couch. I tried to calm myself down, but I couldn't. The betrayal wasn't just in the kiss, or the lies, or the secrets. It was in the truth of what Emily had been feeling, hiding right under my nose for God knows how long. Hours later, as the sun started to set, my phone buzzed again. I didn't even need to look at the screen. It was Emily. I stared at it for a long time before answering. This time, I wasn't shouting. I wasn't angry. I just felt empty. What? Laughed. Good for the soul. Nothing felt good for my soul lately, but I nodded anyway. Fine. One slice. Apple or cherry?
Surprise-me.
She left, and I sipped my coffee, the bitterness grounding me. That's when my phone buzzed. I stared at it, half expecting Emily's name, but it wasn't her this time. It was Ryan. Ryan, hey, doing okay? You still alive? Or should I come dig you out? I smirked faintly, shaking my head. For all his bluntness, Ryan had been my anchor through this. I didn't have the energy to respond, so I just sent back, me, alive. Barely. Almost immediately, my phone buzzed again. Ryan, good. Let me know when you're ready to drink about it. I set the phone face down and leaned back against the booth, staring at nothing. The waitress returned a moment later, sliding a slice of cherry pie in front of me. It was warm, the crust golden and flaking at the edges. Enjoy, Han, she said, and for a moment, her voice sounded like my mom's, like someone who just wanted me to eat something and stop looking like a ghost. By the time I got home that evening, the house felt different. Empty, but not in a haunting way. More like someone had opened a window after years of keeping it closed. I dropped my keys on the table and stood there for a moment, letting the stillness settle around me. My eyes drifted to the corner where Emily's boxes had been. Now that they were gone, the room felt bigger somehow, like there was space to breathe again. But that's the thing about clearing out a space. It makes room for everything else you've been avoiding. I sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the floor as I let the questions return. Where did we go wrong? Was it my long hours at work? Her quiet frustrations she never told me about? The nights we spent together but apart, pretending everything was fine? I'd spent so much time blaming her that I hadn't allowed myself to look in the mirror. That didn't mean she wasn't at fault. It didn't mean what she did was forgivable. But marriage doesn't collapse from one person's weight. It cracks slowly, quietly, until the smallest push shatters everything. She said she felt like she was drowning. I hadn't seen it. I hadn't noticed. And for that, I felt something new creeping into my anger, regret. That night, I pulled open the drawer in the kitchen where we used to keep junk, bills, pens, takeout menus, and dug through it until I found what I was looking for. A small envelope, unopened, with Emily's handwriting on the front. It was a birthday card. She'd given it to me 2 months ago, but we'd gotten into an argument that morning over something stupid, me forgetting to fix the sink, her rolling her eyes, and I never opened it. I'd shoved it in the drawer and let it sit there like a silent protest. I held it in my hands now, my chest tight. Carefully, I opened the flap and pulled out the card. The front was simple, just a photo of a mountain range and the words, "To many more adventures." Inside, her handwriting filled the space. Jake, I know I'm not always easy to love. I'm stubborn, and I'm impatient, and I push too hard when I shouldn't. But I need you to know that through everything, every fight, every rough day, you're still the person I want by my side. You make me feel safe. You make me feel seen. I'm so proud of the life we've built, even when I don't always say it out loud. I love you. I love us. Happy birthday, Jake. Emily. I set the card down on the table and stared at it for a long time, my vision blurring. That was the hardest part of all of this. The knowing that what we had was real once. The love, the connection, it wasn't some lie she told me. It just wasn't enough to stop her from falling apart. And maybe that's what life is, sometimes. You love someone, you give them everything you have, and it's still not enough to save them. But that didn't mean I couldn't save myself. The next morning, I woke up early and cleaned the house top to bottom. I threw out everything I didn't need. The empty bottles, the clutter, the reminders of a life that no longer fit. It wasn't a solution, but it felt like a start. Then, for the first time in weeks, I grabbed my jacket, locked the front door, and stepped outside into the cold air. I didn't know where I was going yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let this destroy me. The life I'd known was over. But maybe, just maybe, that meant I could build something new. One step at a time. The first thing I did that morning was drive to the hardware store. It felt random. impulsive even, but I knew I couldn't spend another day wandering through hollow rooms. If the house was going to be mine again, it needed to change. I needed to change it. Inside, I wandered through the aisles, letting the smell of fresh wood and paint soothe me. I grabbed supplies I hadn't touched in years. Sandpaper, brushes, a few cans of deep blue paint that looked nothing like the dull beige Emily had picked when we first moved in. I filled the cart with purpose, like every brushstroke could scrub away the ghost of our marriage lingering in the corners of the house. Back home, I pushed all the furniture to the center of the living room, threw an old sheet over it and started on the walls. With every roll of paint, the space looked less like ours and more like mine. The walls I'd shared with Emily, where she hung pictures, picked curtains, and rearranged furniture, were disappearing one layer at a time, and it felt good. By the time the first wall was done, my arms ached, my clothes were splattered with blue, and sweat dripped down the back of my neck. But I didn't stop. I turned on music, something loud and gritty, and kept going, the sound drowning out my thoughts. Somewhere between coats of paint, Ryan texted me. "Ryan, you alive, man? Haven't heard from you today." Me, "Yeah, painting the house." Ryan, "Seriously? Who are you? Bob the Builder?" I smirked, sending back a quick reply. Me, "Something like that. Needed to make this place mine again." There was a long pause before his response. "Ryan, proud of you, man. Keep going." I didn't know why, but those words hit me harder than I expected. Keep going. It wasn't advice. It wasn't pity. It was just Ryan, standing quietly in my corner, cheering me on when I wasn't sure how to cheer for myself. It took 3 days to finish the living room. 3 days of sanding, painting, and dragging every ounce of my frustration and pain across those walls. I was sore, bruised, and perpetually covered in specks of paint. But the room was mine now. The dull beige was gone, replaced with dark blue that reminded me of late nights and quiet spaces. I collapsed onto the couch on the final night, staring at my work with a mix of pride and exhaustion. The room was still empty. There were no photos, no decorations, but that felt right. A blank slate. For the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe. On the 4th day, Ryan showed up unannounced, again with 2 six-packs in hand. "You're relentless," I said as I opened the door, stepping aside to let him in. He grinned, kicking off his shoes. "You think I'm going to let you hermit in here forever? Nah, man. Let's see this masterpiece." I led him into the living room, suddenly self-conscious of the space I'd spent days buried in. Ryan whistled low as he looked around. "Damn, looks like a whole new house." "That was the point?" I muttered, shoving my hands into my pockets. He dropped onto the couch, cracking open a beer. "You know, some guys would have just gone on a 3-week bender or bought a motorcycle. But nope, you turned into a freaking DIY wizard." I rolled my eyes and sat down across from him. It was cheaper than therapy. Ryan took a sip of his beer, watching me carefully. "How you feeling, though? For real?" I paused, staring at the wall I'd spent hours painting. "Better, I think. Still angry. Still, I don't know." "Sud." "That's normal," Ryan said. "You don't just forget 7 years overnight. Doesn't mean you're not moving forward." I nodded slowly. He wasn't wrong. The anger had started to cool, replaced by something quieter. A dull ache, like a bruise fading but still tender to the touch. I didn't miss Emily, not really. I missed the idea of her, the version of us that worked, the one I thought would last forever. Sometimes I think about what I could have done differently. I admitted, my voice low, like maybe if I'd paid more attention or said something sooner, it wouldn't have fallen apart. Ryan shook his head. "You can't think like that. Look, maybe there were cracks before Nate, but she made the choice to cheat, Jake. Not you. Don't carry her guilt on top of your own." I swallowed hard, nodding again. "Yeah. And anyway," he continued, grinning suddenly, "you've already got 1 foot out of the grave. Most guys would still be lying face down in bed, re-watching their wedding video and crying into a pizza box." I snorted. "Glad to know the bar is so low." Ryan laughed, raising his beer. "To new beginnings, man. Whatever the hell they look like." I clinked my bottle against his, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled. A real smile, not forced, not bitter. That night, after Ryan left, I sat alone in the living room again. The house was quiet, but this time, the silence didn't feel heavy. I picked up my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found Emily's name. I hovered over it for a second, my thumb hesitating. I wasn't going to call her. Not because I hated her, I didn't anymore, and not because I missed her. I just didn't need her to fill the silence. I opened the text thread and typed out a message I didn't plan to send. I hope you find what you're looking for, Emily. I'm going to be okay. I stared at it for a long moment, then deleted the draft and set the phone down. I didn't need her to know that I'd be okay. I just needed me to know it. I stood up, stretching, and glanced around the room. It wasn't finished yet. There were still other walls to paint, furniture to replace, new memories to create, but it was a start. I walked out onto the back porch and sat on the steps, breathing in the cool night air. The stars were clear above me, scattered across the dark sky like tiny, quiet reminders that life goes on, no matter how broken it feels. And maybe, just maybe, so would I.